The quiet dawn of London brought a rare sense of serenity as the first light of sunrise filtered through the towering glass of the Montgomery and Baird law offices. Alaric Montgomery, the renowned lawyer with sun-kissed brown hair and piercing blue eyes, leaned back in his leather chair, eyes half closed, savoring the peaceful moment before the upcoming storm of public scrutiny inundated the streets. From the 15th floor window he could see the hurried crowds below, each footstep repeating like the unceasing drumbeat of a city that never sleeps. Just yesterday, Alaric had concluded a high-profile case involving senior-level financial fraud. The Southwark Commercial Court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, awarding hundreds of millions of pounds in compensation. The thunderous applause in the courtroom testified to his exceptional talent and tireless dedication. When the gavel finally fell, Alaric felt a bittersweet joy that justice had been served, sorrow for the countless hours, sweat, and bitter struggles that left him questioning what truly gives life its value. His memories drifted back to his earliest days in law. His father once told him, "Son, the legal profession is a quest for truth, but it's also a battle with yourself to never lose your conscience." That warm voice still echoed in his mind whenever he faced overwhelming pressure. Now, with an unshakable reputation, Alaric understood that the pressure never disappeared, it only took on subtler forms, haunting the long nights he spent drafting briefs. The Brightstone Group case had consumed his thoughts for the past 6 months. Every figure, document, and twisted recording played in his head until he discovered the crucial evidence, an email exchange between the CFO and an outside broker. The moment he read that detail, his heart soared, justice was within reach. Yet he couldn't help but wonder how many families had suffered because of this scheme, how many workers had lost their livelihoods, how many dreams had vanished in the market's upheaval. Those questions haunted him even before the trial began. When the trial opened, Alaric strode into the courtroom with pen in hand, his confident frame and resonant voice delivering each sharp argument. Every question he posed was like a sharpened spear, sowing doubt in the defense witness's testimony. At times, he had to stifle his anger as some tried to evade responsibility or patch together half-truths. The weight on his shoulders was immense, but he knew he could not falter, for justice brooked no hesitation. When the bench retired to deliberate, Alaric stepped into the corridor. His polished leather shoes left faint imprints on the dimly lit stone floor. He inhaled the crisp air, feeling the breath of the city mingle with his own lifeblood. At times, he felt adrift between the glow of public acclaim and the sleepless nights spent wrestling with cases. Fame was a double-edged sword, on one side it protected him, on the other it threatened to sever every personal bond. A gentle knock on the door interrupted his reverie. His assistant, a recent Cambridge law graduate, handed him a thick envelope. "Mr. Montgomery, here are the new files for Mr. Charles Wren, his family estate dispute." Alaric furrowed his brow, glancing at the ceiling inscription. He had never heard the name Charles Wren, but the phrase estate dispute immediately sparked a litigator's curiosity. "Send me the full details." "We'll meet this afternoon," he said. After his assistant departed, Alaric sat down and opened the envelope. Inside lay a power of attorney agreement and a case summary. A former couple from the Wren family had divorced over asset conflicts, threatening a protracted battle. The fee was generous, yet he quickly realized this was more than numbers on paper. In Charles Wren's signature lay the psyche of a father torn between wealth and his duty to his daughter. Evening shadows stretched across Westminster as Alaric left the office. The traffic noise grew louder, red and green lights blinking like arrows of time shooting ever forward. He imagined his first meeting with the client, a powerful man across a dark wooden table, thick dossiers laid out, eyes mingling suspicion with hope. A strange excitement fluttered in his chest, much like his very first day in court. Alaric's life had long been defined by landmark cases, masterful rebuttals, and an indisputable reputation. Yet, deep down, he hungered for something beyond the law, a genuine emotion, subtle bonds that daily work seldom offered. That yearning stirred anew as he recalled his father's admonition, "Don't let yourself become a robot of justice." When the streetlights flickered on, Alaric paused before a small cafe in Covent Garden. He stepped inside and ordered a sugar-free espresso. Its rich aroma soothed his mind. Outside, the drizzle swept through early autumn leaves. London was achingly beautiful in the rain, as if cleansing itself of past scars to welcome new beginnings. Gazing through the misted window, Alaric resolved, tomorrow morning, I begin the Wren case, a story whose ending is unknown, but no less dramatic. With that, Alaric Montgomery left the cafe, determined not only to win in the courtroom but to uncover the hidden corners behind London's dazzling lights, where untold lives, buried secrets, and unspoken feelings lay waiting. In his heart, the flame of passion rekindled, illuminating the path ahead, no matter how uncertain the road might be. Early morning in Le Marais, Paris still lay shrouded in a hazy mist as Alaric Wren stepped across the cobblestone streets. Golden light filtered through the windows of the Atelier de Rêve's perfumery, where she poured her soul into every drop of essential oil. The scent of bergamot rind drifted through the air, mingling with the warm aroma of sandalwood, lending the room a feeling both intimate and distant. Alaric swept her long, silky black hair up, revealing her slender shoulders and graceful neck. Her amber eyes wandered over the rows of glass bottles neatly arranged on the shelves, yet in her heart lingered a vague loneliness. At her workbench lay a line of test tubes filled with damask rose extract, iris essence, and cedarwood. Every morning, Alaric would sit for hours, listening to the soft clink of glass and the gentle rattle of metal as she stirred her mixtures. To her, those sounds formed a symphony in which she found peace amid a chaotic world. All the pain of her fractured family, her mother's passing and the tense relationship with her stepmother, was pushed aside into the silence of fragrance. In recent days, Alaric had been tirelessly experimenting with new formulas, deftly blending citrus accords, jasmine blooms, and musky notes. She sought to create a fragrance of memory, evoking the happy moments of her childhood with her mother before everything fell apart. But whenever she thought of her stepmother, Ophelia Beaumont, her resolve faltered. Ophelia never acknowledged Alaric's talent and insisted that perfumery was a pursuit reserved for daughters of distinguished lineage. That pressure only drove Alaric to prove her worth all the more. Around midday, the atelier's doorbell chimed. Alexander, Alaric's longtime collaborator, entered carrying a small box. Inside was an invitation to the Dior runway debut of a new fragrance line, a gathering of high society and cosmetics critics. Alaric narrowed her eyes, torn between excitement and apprehension. She knew this was a vital opportunity to establish her name, yet her private nature made her reluctant to appear before a crowd. As evening descended, the sunset cast its glow over red-tiled roofs and illuminated the Montmartre spire like a living painting. Alaric donned a simple black sheath dress that accentuated her graceful curves. She locked the atelier's door, lifted the small box, and slid into her vintage Citroën DS. The engine's hum carried her along winding lanes toward the Grand Palais, where the event would take place. Before the alabaster facade, couture gowns shimmered alongside sleek tuxedos, creating an opulent tableau. Flashes erupted as reporters and guests mingled. Alaric chose a shadowed corner from which to observe. When the MC announced the creator of Paris's nocturnal fragrance, she stepped onto the small stage, her expression as immobile as marble, her eyes serene yet proud. Applause thundered as she lifted the clear glass vial and introduced Nocturne d'Etoile, a union of night-blooming jasmine and warm sandalwood. In that moment, Alaric sensed the admiration of all eyes upon her, yet a subtle sadness lingered within. She recalled her mother's tender gaze when she first spoke of her perfumery dreams, so different from Ophelia's cold focus on profit margins. After the presentation, Alaric slipped behind a velvet curtain. Alexander awaited her, handing over a flute of champagne. They exchanged polite words before he gently asked, "Are you all right?" Alaric offered a slight smile, her lips curved but her gaze remained distant. She sipped, the champagne's effervescence dancing on her tongue and lifting her spirits. The pressure of the evening seemed to dissolve, replaced by pride and exhilaration. On the drive back to Atelier de Rêves, Alohan's phone pinged with an email titled Wren vs. Wren, status update. She paused in the streetlight's glow, its beam tracing her fine features and the flicker of worry in her eyes. The brief message informed her of an upcoming meeting with Alaric Montgomery at his London office next week. She brushed away a surge of emotion. For years she had kept her creative work separate from family strife, but now avoidance was no longer possible. Back in the atelier's dim interior, only the computer screen's glow remained. Alohan lifted her phone and stared at a photograph of herself and her mother as children, smiling brightly among lavender fields. A tear slipped down her cheek. Could she be strong enough to face the schemes and machinations behind this lawsuit? Ophelia had already schemed to sell her fragrance rights to a major conglomerate. Such selfishness fueled Alohan's determination to fight to preserve her mother's legacy. That night, she stayed up until after midnight, journaling in warm scripted lines. She recorded her ideas about the depths of nocturne diatoile, seeking balance between pain and hope. On the final page, she wrote, "If love were a fragrance, mother would be the everlasting bass note. I must protect that legacy with all my heart." By dawn's first light at the atelier, Alohan was packed for London. She donned a deep navy wool coat and slipped on sunglasses to conceal half her face, carrying with her special fragrance samples, childhood memories, and the hope of justice for her mother. Stepping into Charles de Gaulle Airport, the lingering scent of Parisian night clung to her resolve. She was ready to face the legal drama awaiting her. On the westbound flight, Alohan closed her eyes and imagined entering the conference room at Montgomery and Baird. She vowed to remain composed and articulate, so that Alaric Montgomery would see not only her talent but also the profound love she bore for her mother's memory. In the cabin's quiet, the spirit of the City of Light seemed to surround her, reminding her that fragrance does more than awaken the senses, it connects souls. And her meeting with Alaric would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one of family tragedy, power plays, and a budding, unspoken bond. The next morning, as London's late spring drizzle still speckled the soaring glass facade, Alohan Wren paused before the white marble entrance of the Montgomery and Baird law offices. The golden Montgomery and Baird lettering reflected the dim streetlights, lending the scene an air both solemn and chilly. She tugged at the collar of her dark blue wool coat, drew a deep breath to steady the flutter in her chest, then tapped twice tap on the thick oak door. Inside the red-carpeted waiting room, she chose a beige leather armchair and set her black leather handbag beside it. All was silent except for the tick of the wall clock and the rustle of leaves beyond the window. Alohan lowered her sunglasses further, hiding half her delicate face. She fixed the ceiling-mounted security camera with a guarded glance, then studied every detail around her: the oil painting of a misty Thames harbor, the walnut bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes, and the small tea table laid with a silver tray and the aroma of green tea. In that instant, a memory of her birth mother, Camilla Wren, came to mind, how her mother had once taught her to blend rose and vanilla oils into soft, comforting notes. Thanks to her mother, Alohan knew that each drop of perfume told a story, conveyed an emotion. But Ophelia, her stepmother, never praised that artistry, she only calculated profit margins and market share. Today, Alohan was here not only to honor her mother's memory but to reclaim that spiritual legacy from Ophelia. The door opened, and Alaric Montgomery appeared. He entered the waiting room with measured steps, his blue eyes surveying the space. He wore a tailored ash-gray suit, a neatly knotted navy tie, and polished leather shoes. He paused at the reception desk to take the case file from his assistant, then turned toward the visitor. The sight of the slight woman in her long wool coat, with its hem brushing her black heels, and her hair swept over one shoulder made him hesitate. Even behind her sunglasses he recognized those amber eyes, familiar, as if from a dream. He offered a polite smile and spoke in a steady voice, "Good morning, Ms. Wren. I'm Alaric Montgomery. It's a pleasure to welcome you." She lifted her sunglasses, revealing clear eyes that were half closed, as if guarding some inner thought. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery. I'm Alohan Wren," she replied in a soft but firm tone. In that moment, both realized that this meeting carried more weight than they had anticipated. They proceeded to the main conference room, a square chamber lined in dark oak, with a long table seating 10. Seated there already were Ophelia Caldwell, Alohan's stepmother, beside Charles Wren. Ophelia wore a cream business suit and her hair in a proud updo. Her face was taut, her sharp gaze flicking to Alohan with the unspoken message that the heiress was nothing more than an obstacle to the family fortune. Charles Wren, his hair streaked with gray, held a warm cup of tea and nodded greetings to Alaric. "Mr. Montgomery, thank you for taking this case. Ophelia and I need a fair resolution," he said in a voice that was gentle yet tinged with sorrow. In his eyes Alohan saw awkward regret for losing her mother and a desire to atone. Alaric carefully spread the documents before him, the power of attorney, asset appraisals, land use certificates. He looked up at each of them. "I've reviewed the materials. The Wren versus Wren dispute centers on three main areas: the Kensington real estate, the securities portfolio, and the perfume formula copyright." He paused, then added in a measured tone, "I've also noted some irregularities, share transfers executed hastily and without transparency. Mrs. Caldwell, could you clarify the timing and reasons for those?" Ophelia's brow rose, then she answered thoughtfully, "When I officially joined Wren Perfumery, the shares were still in Camilla's name. The transfer documents were signed within 2 weeks before her passing. I suspect someone exploited her frailty to pressure her signature." Alohan held her breath as she listened. Each mention of shares, documents, certificates cut through her childhood memories like a cold blade. She remembered her mother proudly showing her their first perfume formula, how they spent nights in the lab testing every note and recording precise measurements. Now it felt as though Ophelia aimed to claim it all. Alaric jotted notes, his gaze occasionally resting on Alohan. He recognized in her not merely a proxy but the sole creative rights holder. He frowned, wondering, does she have evidence of these irregular transfers? He gently asked, "Mrs. Wren, do you possess any original contracts signed by your mother?" Alohan tilted her head, a spark in her eyes. "My mother always kept an original copy in the safe at the Paris atelier. I can provide it once I return there." Her voice did not tremble, though a faint flush colored her cheeks. The meeting continued as Alaric outlined a preliminary strategy: gather evidence while filing for an interim order to preserve the shares' value, and petition the court to freeze all related accounts. Charles nodded in agreement. Ophelia's brow tightened, her eyes calculating. Alohan knew she must prove herself not as the incompetent daughter in Ophelia's eyes, but as the rightful guardian of her mother's legacy and the Wren family honor. When the meeting concluded, Alaric invited the Wrens and Ophelia to follow him down to the office library. Among the law classics on the shelves, he pointed out a case file annotated in his own hand from 2 years prior, a French entrepreneur's family rights case he'd won. It felt like an omen for what lay ahead. He extended his hand, shaking each in turn, then turned to Alohan with sincere eyes. "Mrs. Wren, I'm honored to represent you. We'll see this through." Alohan felt her shoulders relax as she offered a gentle smile, the first one born not of memory or duty alone, but of shared trust with the lawyer before her. In that moment, two hearts, one warm with grief for a lost mother, the other steady in search of truth, began to beat in unison. Even London's overcast streets seemed to listen, anticipating the legal and emotional symphony to come. From that first encounter, Alaric and Alohan's journey would be more than a fierce courtroom battle. It would be an exploration of the soul, where unspoken feelings would blossom through each sharp argument and precious drop of fragrant oil. Under umbrellas holding back the rain, they left Montgomery and Baird, carrying a shared thirst for justice and a budding hope amid the old-world city. Heavy rain pounded Corso Buenos Aires, the rows of umbrellas barely concealing the downpour as droplets seeped through the wool of Alohan Wren's gray trench coat. She hurried along the soaked pavement in low-heeled pumps that allowed her to move swiftly. Just moments earlier she had unveiled Nocturne d'Etoile at Milan's premier perfumery fair, where Europe's top experts and distributors gathered beneath crystal chandeliers and beside glass shelves showcasing rare essential oil distillations. Amid that sophisticated crowd, Aloan still felt hollow, her smile serene, her eyes distant, as if searching for something lost. When the event closed, she quietly packed the final fragrance samples into the black leather box, a gift from her mother who had guided her early experiments. Her work always swept her into creative flow, but today a gentle unease crept in. She glanced up at the cloud-choked sky, wondering whether her mother in Paris was safe. Back at Wren Manor on the outskirts of Paris, Camilla Wren sat in her study on a call. Rain tapped the window panes, amplifying the solitude. She had just confirmed her next appointment with Alaric Montgomery. Determined to shield Aloan from worry, Camilla kept the details private, but Ophelia Caldwell, Aloan's stepmother, watched in secret. Behind velvet drapes, Ophelia harbored a dark plan to remove Camilla from the inheritance dispute and seize the sole rights to the fragrance formula. Ophelia had orchestrated every detail. The night before, she lured Camilla to discuss the copyright agreement in the wine cellar beneath the mansion. Trusting Ophelia, her only remaining kin, Camilla descended the cold stone stairs, the single sconce casting faint yellow light. The two shadows merged, and Ophelia feigned concern before plunging the cellar into darkness. In the cramped room, she wielded a small stool, shoved Camilla hard against the already locked oak door, and watched her fall. Camilla's head struck the cellar window frame with sickening force, blood blossoming across her white silk blouse. Ophelia screamed in mock horror and rushed forward to help, crafting the perfect tragic accident. When the police arrived, Ophelia had already retrieved Camilla's phone, erased all recordings and messages to Aloan, and claimed Mrs. Wren slipped in the rain and suffered a fatal head injury. The medical report confirmed severe traumatic brain injury, non-survivable. Ophelia's performance was flawless, yet one small clue could unravel her scheme. In Milan, Aloan had just stepped from a taxi when her phone rang. The caller ID read Paris's Wren Manor. She answered to Alexander's trembling voice, your mother's had an accident at home. You must fly back immediately." Aloan froze on the street as car horns blared. Her world shattered, anxiety, confusion, and overwhelming anger surged at once. She clasped her hands to her mouth to stifle a sob, tears blurring her vision. That night the plane departed Milan, carrying Aloan's wounded heart westward. By her window seat, she gazed at the golden lights dotted across the Tyrrhenian Sea below. It felt as though thousands of knives pierced her chest. She recalled her mother's final words, "My dear, I've been so tired lately, please take care of yourself," before the call abruptly ended. She wept openly, her tears mingling with the rain pattering against the window. In business class she fought to compose herself. Aloan opened her small notebook, where she recorded every oil ratio and formula, and lingered over the last page inscribed, "For Mother, who always believed in me." She pressed her hand to the paper, as if holding her mother's final keepsake. In London, Alaric Montgomery received an urgent fax from Paris, Camilla Wren's death certificate, stamped in red, fatal accident. He sat back, troubled, sensing the mysterious tie between Aloan and this case's fate. He summoned his assistant, "Book me a flight to Paris. I want to visit Mrs. Wren in the hospital." A new concern stirred within him. What began as an inheritance dispute had grown into personal tragedy. The plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle, and Aloan stumbled into the arrivals hall, drenched and pale. She forced herself through customs. Alexander and a local attorney met her, guiding her into an ambulance. Sirens wailed as the convoy sped toward Wren Manor. At the mansion gate, Ophelia awaited them, her makeup flawless, tears contrived. She rushed forward, enveloping Aloan in a tight embrace. "My dear, your stepmother is so worried about you." Aloan brushed her off, leaning against the ambulance door, saying nothing. Hatred churned within her. How could this woman feign such shock while Aloan had lost her mother? Inside the grand drawing room, its ivory Lenox rugs stretching beneath cathedral-height windows, Aloan stood before her mother's body, swathed in a pristine taffeta shroud. Camilla lay still, her face peaceful as if in sleep, her gentle smile lingered at the corners of her lips. Aloan knelt beside her, clasping her mother's hand as tears flowed. "Mother. I'm so sorry," she sobbed, guilt and heartbreak overwhelming her. If only she hadn't left Paris, if she'd answered that second call, if she'd stayed by her side. Ophelia approached, brandishing her phone. "I called for emergency medical assistance at once. The doctors did all they could," she said with false calm. Aloan said nothing, her gaze fixed on her stepmother as though seeing true betrayal for the first time. That night, Aloan stayed awake in the dark room, moonlight filtering through the drapes. She wrote to Alaric, "Please help me investigate my mother's death. I need the truth." She signed hastily, folded the letter, and placed it on the bedside table, her sole beacon of hope that Mr. Montgomery could uncover justice and perhaps warm her frozen heart. Before dawn in Paris, Aloan repacked once more, ready to depart with Alaric. Two wounded souls, a daughter bereft of her mother and a lawyer sworn to justice, would enter the next phase of their battle, where the crime hidden among sweet scents would soon be exposed. And in that tranquil moment, Paris held its breath, awaiting the light of truth to pierce the darkness. The early morning mist still clung to the stone steps before Wren Manor as Alaric Montgomery stepped through the great iron gates, clutching his brown leather briefcase and laptop. The faint scent of last night's ashes hung in the air, evidence of his and Aloan's midnight investigation. They had hired a small private detective team to covertly examine the wine cellar crime scene, where Camilla Wren's accident occurred, in search of the murky details Ophelia tried so hard to conceal. This morning, Alaric had arranged to meet the mysterious young woman in the old library, where golden candlelight filtered through rows of leather-bound books, creating an atmosphere both warm and hushed. Aloan was already there, seated at the mahogany table, leafing through a folder of photographs taken after the police departed. Her amber eyes glimmered with sorrow as she looked up at Alaric, anxiety still etched on her lips. "I had the detectives photograph every corner," she said quietly, from the dried blood on the cellar window frame to the small slit mark on the stone step. Alaric sank into the chair opposite her and slowly opened his briefcase, pulling out the initial crime scene photos. The clearest discrepancy, he pointed to an image near the cellar entrance, is that two sets of fingerprints were mixed, one set Camilla's, and another, very distinct, set on the banister. Yet the police only collected Camilla's prints. The flickering candlelight cast shadows across Aloan's determined face. She shook her head, her voice catching. "I sent those prints to the lab. They confirmed those second prints didn't belong to my mother. They must be Ophelia's." In Aloan's mind flashed the memory of her stepmother's savage grin under the cellar's pale light, the perfect staging of a tragic accident. Alaric set his laptop on the table and opened the detective's digital files. A schematic of the cellar appeared, marking Camilla's path and the exact location of her slip. He spoke deliberately, "Your mother was pushed from mid-step, not slid from the top. And Ophelia must have locked the door from the outside so no one would know she was in there." Aloan swallowed hard, her eyes burning with resolve. "I need to see how that lock works," she said. "Ophelia claims she never had the cellar key, but according to our detectives, there is only one, and it's kept with the house's master key ring." Rage coiled in her chest at the thought of the woman who stole her mother's life. Alaric rose and placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "We must stay composed. Physical evidence and witnesses will leave Ophelia no room to deny this. I'll petition the court for a reinspection of the scene." He met her gaze firmly. "You are not alone. I will stand by you to the end." Morning sunlight slanted through the library windows, illuminating Aloan's face and highlighting each fine line of her resolve. She nodded, warmth blooming in her heart at his promise to share her burden. They left the library, traversing the candlelit hallway to Ophelia's former study on the second floor. According to the deed records, This room had been Camilla's private research space until Ophelia demanded it be converted into her office last month. Alaric knocked gently and called, "Mrs. Caldwell, I have a few questions about the cellar key." Ophelia opened the door, immaculate in her business attire and wearing a calm expression. She studied him coolly. "Mr. Montgomery, what do you expect me to say?" she asked softly, but with unwavering certainty. Facing a master actor only strengthened Alaric's resolve. He produced a court-issued warrant, permission to search the room and seize the original key. Ophelia raised an eyebrow in feigned surprise. "I always leave the master key on the reception desk," she said, directing him downstairs. There, on an antique brass tray, gleamed the silver key. Plainclothes detectives and the private investigators stepped forward, confiscating the key and comparing its ridges to prints on file. The second set of fingerprints matched Ophelia's personnel file sample perfectly. Confronted with judicial authority, her composure faltered, her face drained of color, 2 beads of sweat rolling down her temple. She stamped her foot and snapped, "This is a frame-up. Surely Mrs. Wren could have slipped in the rain." But Alaric was prepared. He pulled up a recovered email Camilla sent to Ophelia days before her death, demanding the fragrance rights contract be signed immediately. "This email was restored from the server," he declared. "You deleted it to hide your motive for murder." Ophelia's mask of calm shattered, her eyes widened in panic. The room fell silent, save for her ragged breaths. Aloan stepped forward, her hand trembling but her voice steady. "You killed my mother for the balance sheet and the last piece of her legacy you wanted to claim." Each word cut through the stillness like a blade. Unable to deny the mounting evidence, physical proof, emails, fingerprints, Ophelia broke down in tears. "You know nothing. I've suffered injustices." She sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. But now every shred of proof condemned her beyond rebuttal. Alaric and Aloan's work was not yet done. He arranged an immediate homicide and fraud indictment and applied for Ophelia's provisional detention. Aloan looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. He placed a reassuring hand on the table beside her. "You had the courage to seek justice for your mother. I only helped bring the truth to light." Under candlelight in the VIP room of the Paris Police Department, they emerged together as the first rays of daylight filtered in. Patrol car sirens echoed down the empty streets, marking the close of this dark chapter. Aloan gazed at her own hands, each line a memory of her mother, now a symbol of resilience and justice. Alaric escorted her back to her hotel. They spoke no words on the drive, yet the atmosphere between them had transformed. What began as a dry estate dispute had become a shared journey through pain, deception, and finally, truth, each step weaving them closer. Paris still shimmered beneath its golden street lamps, but for Aloan, today's light signaled a fresh beginning. She was no longer alone in her fight. At her side stood a steadfast lawyer with a warm heart, ready to stand with her. As Alaric's silhouette disappeared beyond the hotel door, Aloan looked up at the night sky and smiled softly. A whisper echoed in her mind, "Thank you, fate, for bringing him to me." And that night, Paris seemed to answer with the rustle of leaves, carrying the faint fragrance of justice and hope. The light streaming through the towering stained glass windows bathes courtroom number 12 of the Palais de Justice in Paris, where more than 200 pairs of eyes fix upon the long table flanked by prosecution, defense, and witnesses. The rustle of press backs and the echo of footsteps in the corridors fade away when the presiding judge, Madame Duval, raps her gavel to open the session, and absolute silence settles over the room. Everyone, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense counsel, spectators, and reporters, turns their attention to the plaintiff, Aloan Wren. Dressed in charcoal gray tailoring and clutching her file folder, her slender figure conveys both sorrow and steely resolve. Opposite her sits stepmother Ophelia Caldwell in somber black business attire. The regal composure she once wore has given way to tension, her eyes widen each time her attorney whispers in her ear. They have battled for control of Camilla Wren's estate, but today's stakes are higher still: murder. The prosecutor charges premeditated homicide, confident that the evidence Alaric Montgomery unearthed proves Ophelia's guilt. When prosecutor Pierre Laurent rises, he delivers a concise, forceful opening. On June 12, Camilla Wren was pushed down the stairs of the Wren Manor wine cellar, sustaining a fatal skull fracture. Fingerprint analysis, recovered emails, and the independent testimony of private investigators confirm that Mrs. Caldwell alone had both motive and opportunity. Laurent fixes Ophelia with a steely gaze as he speaks. Eloane grips the wooden armrest beside the witness stand, her heart pounds. Visions of her mother, her silvery hair, gentle smile, flicker through her mind. She inhales deeply to steady herself when the bailiff calls her to testify. The polished benches that once held family laughter now serve as her steadfast support in this decisive moment. At the stand, Eloane raises her hand to swear the oath, her amber eyes alight with determination. Her voice is clear but laced with pain as she recalls her mother's final video call. "She told me she was so tired, she couldn't speak for long." Each word tears at the courtroom's hush. Eloane recounts the email her mother sent Ophelia, requesting an extension of the fragrance rights agreement, an email Ophelia deleted, the special cellar key her mother kept hidden, and the unnatural slip mark on the stone step. Ophelia tugs at her sleeve, feigning composure, but the tremor in her hand betrays her. As the court displays the recovered email and fingerprint images on the large screen, every detail clicks into place: the cursor hovering over the deleted message, the dried smear on the banister, the erased security camera footage. A forensic expert's voice intones, "The second fingerprint matches Mrs. Caldwell's sample exactly." The courtroom seems to hold its breath, as though each click were a bullet piercing the shroud of lies. Ophelia's defense counsel, Maître Dupont, stands to rebut. His warm but incisive tone rings out: "Mrs. Caldwell is a long-standing member of the Wren family and had no motive to kill her stepmother. All so-called evidence is circumstantial. That second fingerprint could easily have been transferred innocently. Perhaps the victim brushed her hand against the banister, and a recovered email doesn't prove deletion by Mrs. Caldwell." He brandishes a defense expert's sitemap in an effort to challenge the fingerprint's placement and sow doubt. Seated behind Eloane, Alaric Montgomery's brows knit in determination. He knows the defense will seek to muddy the waters, but he grows all the more resolved. When cross-examination ends, it is his turn to speak. Rising, he approaches the lectern with measured gravity. "Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense's theory rests on baseless speculation. We possess the locksmith's logbook confirming that both the master key and the cellar key were kept in Mrs. Caldwell's office on the very day of the tragedy. The forensic report before you establishes that the second fingerprint could not have been left by mere contact, it was imprinted under force." Rustles of papers and the click of a measuring scale punctuate the room as Alaric holds up the printed expert report. His voice remains calm and unwavering. "Mrs. Caldwell orchestrated this crime. She deleted digital evidence, locked the cellar door, and staged an accident. This was no slip, it was premeditated homicide." Maître Dupont's posture falters, though he steels himself to remain standing. The duel of arguments stretches over 6 hours, with prosecution and defense volleying exhibits and expert opinions. The defense contests the authenticity of digital evidence. The prosecutor tightens each question around the chain of custody. When the prosecution is granted the final word, Laurent stands and addresses the court with conviction. "Justice demands not only proof, but conscience. A woman who stole a mother's life for material gain must answer to the law." Judge Duval raps her gavel again, closing the arguments and retiring the jury to deliberate. The courtroom's hush deepens as every gaze returns to Eloane. She sits upright, left hand clutching her folder, right hand grazing its edge, an instinct to anchor herself. Her heart hammers, yet she draws strength from the silence, recalling Alaric's words, "You did exceptionally well." As lawyers, experts, and witnesses file out, Eloane catches Alaric's eye. He offers her a brief, encouraging smile, more heartfelt than any spoken commendation. She nods in return, affirming her trust in him. During the verdict's interlude, Aloan and Alaric exchange soft, knowing glances. She realizes the loneliness that haunted her is giving way to a newfound sense of peace and hope. No words pass between them, their shared warmth and quiet confidence speak volumes. At last, Judge Duval returns, her voice steady. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony, the jury finds Ophelia Caldwell guilty of both premeditated homicide and asset fraud. She is sentenced to 18 years imprisonment and ordered to relinquish all estate claims to plaintiff Aloan Wren. A collective sigh sweeps the courtroom. Some whisper, but Aloan feels only a surge of relief. Rising slowly, she approaches the bench and weeps softly. Alaric steps forward, gathering her in his arms. Resting her head on his shoulder, she feels his steady heartbeat and comforting warmth through his suit. Beneath the courthouse's lofty arches, justice has prevailed, and, more profoundly, humanity and faith have carried her through the darkest hour. Outside, a light drizzle falls on Paris, but in Aloan's heart the sky has cleared. Together with Alaric, she places flowers at a memorial for her mother, pledging to carry on her legacy, crafting scents that evoke memory and love. From this day forward, their path will not only traverse cold legal battles but also a shared journey toward happiness and trust. Paris's night had barely waned when Aloan Wren stepped out of Wren Manor, her amber eyes glinting in the car's headlights. She lifted her luggage into the waiting sedan, leaving behind keepsakes and painful memories. For the first time in her life, she departed the city of light with a shattered heart, but also with resolute determination. The car horn's reluctant honk mixed with raindrops pattering on the windshield, deepening the sense of solitude. As they sped down Avenue Charles de Gaulle, Aloan bowed her head over a photograph of her mother on her lap, whispering, "Mother, I promise to protect your final gift." At 2 a.m., an Airbus A321 bound for Milan carried the petite figure in her sleek black suit and leather travel case. She sat by the window, watching the ribbon of lights spread beneath the drifting clouds. Milan was no longer a place to be lauded for her talent, it was where she must confront her darkest memories. The East Asia fragrance line contract soon to be signed, the new testing facility, and the recollection of that slick cellar floor. She closed her eyes and inhaled the lingering scent on her collar, the ylang-ylang essential oil her mother had blended for that fateful launch. The prepare for landing chime sounded in the cabin. Aloan closed her documents, retrieved her case, and descended the boarding stairs onto Malpensa tarmac. She hailed a taxi to Brera, where the Atelier de Rêves testing branch awaited. The city lights still glowed, life not yet fully awakened, but she dove straight into work. Immersing herself in formulas and accords was her unspoken law, a creative sanctuary that eased her pain. The next morning, she met with her research team. They reported on the reaction of oils with various denaturants, the average scent release at 25 degrees Celsius. Each precise measurement and chemical name commanded her full focus. Her mind became a private realm dedicated solely to nocturne diatoils refinement. Yet amid the sterile data, she caught a flicker of memory, the exact jasmine to pine resin ratio her mother had perfected, sending a tremor through her hand, as though her mother still worked by her side. After the meeting, Aloan checked her phone and saw Alexander's message, "Tickets to London, Tokyo, and New York are booked. Let me know what else you need." She forced a small smile as she replied, "Thank you. I'll need you to locate the finished goods warehouse in Tokyo." Having sent her text, she gazed thoughtfully through the studio window at the morning light filtering over drying sprigs of lavender on the wooden shelves. Meanwhile, at Montgomery and Baird in London, Alaric Montgomery read Aloan's email announcing her departure to Milan. "Please be ready if I need you." His heart clenched. Among hundreds of cases, this was the first time he felt compelled to drop everything for one woman alone. He rose from his desk, looked out over the tranquil Serpentine from the 12th floor, and resolved, "I will follow her." Though the London-Milan flight was 2 hours, Alaric could not remain at his office. He delegated the Wren versus Wren files to a colleague, arranged for updates on the pending motions, and departed that night. London's chill did not dampen his fervor to reunite with the enigmatic woman. Stepping off the Milan train into the warm air, he wore his heavy wool coat and headed straight for the studio address. They reunited in the lab at 5 p.m. Alone, engrossed in sample distribution, did not notice him enter until he tapped the stainless steel bench. She started, her eyes widening before misting with tears of surprise. "You arrived early?" she asked, voice trembling. Alaric offered a warm smile. "I didn't want to miss any moment you might need me." She nodded, her expression softening but her posture still guarded. "I only asked for help with the Tokyo contract. Otherwise, I'm fine." Alaric set his leather satchel on a stool. "I'll coordinate with our team in Japan. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to stay a few days and help oversee the protocol." Eloan hesitated, then agreed. "The research team will invite you to tomorrow's meeting. Thank you for your support." Even that modest acknowledgement filled him with joy, though she did not explicitly admit need. He recognized her internal conflict between independence and trust. The next day, Eloan flew to Tokyo to meet her Japanese partners. The schedule was tight. She had to ensure the test samples retained their integrity and meet the contract deadline. In a refrigerated warehouse in Shinjuku, among temperature-controlled containers redolent of cedarwood and industrial denaturant, she encountered professional precision that put her at ease. She permitted herself a small smile, letting go briefly of her heavy heart. A few hours later, she boarded her flight to New York. She was slated to present at an independent fragrance expo in Manhattan, introducing Nocturne D'Etoile to the North American market. Seated in business class, she looked down upon Fifth Avenue, Times Square's neon glow blinking like a million stars. Behind her, Alaric sat inconspicuously on the same flight, not because business required him in New York, but because she needed the comfort of knowing he was there. At the Metropolitan Pavilion, she arranged petite glass vials into a petal pattern. Her hand trembled as buyers approached and she explained her olfactory vision, professional yet edged with vulnerability. As she offered a tester, Alaric appeared beside her with a supportive smile. "Are you all right?" he murmured. She returned a small, warmer smile. "With you here, I am." Yet the journey did not end there. Each city added more partnership offers, extending their separations still further. Alaric insisted on accompanying her. She sometimes gently declined, but he persisted with a patient grin. Eloan prized her freedom and feared burdening anyone, and each time he materialized beside her, she felt guilty for neglecting family, though now her only family was her mother's memory and their growing bond. On the final flight from New York to London, Eloan received a message from her Hong Kong partner. "The flagship store site is ready, please come review it." She chuckled wearily and replied, "Give me 2 weeks, I'll fly over." She glanced at the empty seat beside her, the spot where Alaric should have been, yet he remained in London preparing for the second hearing against Ophelia. A pang of loneliness struck her. His presence had become her essential support. In that hushed moment aboard the business-class cabin, Eloan realized that her quest for justice had become a journey to the heart. She typed to Alaric, "Thank you for following me everywhere. Wait for me in Hong Kong." She closed her eyes, letting the notes of cedarwood and jasmine swirl in her mind, a testament to their unending journey, where two hearts met through symphonies of scent and a promise never to let go. The early dawn in Grasse seemed infused with the breath of endless lavender fields. The first sunlight filtered through the olive leaves, gently caressing Eloan's skin as she passed beneath the moss-covered iron gate of the Maison de Notes. The warm aroma of lavender blended with the soft sweetness of damask rose, momentarily banishing all her worries, except that Alaric Montgomery had insisted on coming to the birthplace of her mother's olfactory symphonies. Today, he was more than her lawyer, he was her companion, eager to help her recreate memories of her mother in every vial. The entire distillation workshop was simply elegant, oak shelves holding wooden barrels of fresh blossoms, glass containers filled with concentrated essences, and at the center of the room, a white marble table set with a traditional copper still. Eloan removed her leather gloves and lifted her hands to bask in the morning light, then paused as she spotted Alaric standing in the corridor. He wore a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, holding a small notebook, a keepsake filled with every detail from trials and investigations. As they entered together, Aloan felt the worlds that separated them, she, the perfumer who needed hushed solitude, he, the litigator who thrived under bright lights and tense confrontations. Yet here, amid sunlit lavender blooms, that distance melted away. They paused before the solid copper still where her mother once taught her about bass notes. Gently, Aloan placed a handful of fresh lavender into the stills flask and poured in pure alcohol held at precisely 16 degrees Celsius. She glanced at Alaric, anticipation in her eyes. Mother always said real fragrance only reveals itself when you learn to wait patiently. Alaric nodded, his voice warm. I remember your mother telling me about your first lavender harvest together in the Alpes Maritimes. Aloan fell silent. She had never shared much about her mother, but in his words she sensed genuine care. As the distillation began, Aloan guided him on how to place his hand on the still's body, feeling each tremor as vapor rose. The rich perfume permeated the air, and in the golden light streaming through the windows, it felt as if only they existed. Aloan spoke of the first small trials she and her mother held for local clients, laughter echoing through the wooden workshop. Alaric listened in respectful awe. When the initial distillate was collected, Aloan added several drops of damask rose essential oil, measured in the exact 5-to-2 ratio her mother had taught her. Alaric watched intently, wiping the glass and noting every step. Finally, she smiled softly. This is the note of memory my mother perfected from the start. She tilted a single drop onto his palm. He inhaled deeply, eyes closed, finding in that scent a gentle, wordless melody. He opened his eyes, exhaling in delight. I understand, this is more than lavender and rose, it's longing, love, and loss. Aloan's heart trembled. For the first time, someone truly felt what she wove into her fragrances. The invisible walls she had built between her and others began to crumble. In the hush of the workshop, Aloan blurted, You don't mind my unusual scent, do you? Alaric offered a playful grin, only if it weren't made by you. His simple words bound their hearts with an unspoken promise. She saw not only professional respect in his gaze, but faith in her. When the sample was complete, Aloan led him outside through a gate into the lavender garden behind the house. Their footsteps mingled with the hum of bees, bordering neat rows of violet blooms. She spoke of the days she and her mother spent journaling every nuance of each trial, pages stained with powdered petals, testimony to a fierce love for their craft. Alaric listened, then gently laid a hand on her shoulder. May I see your mother's journal? Aloan paused, struck by emotion. Carefully, she opened her leather satchel and withdrew an old leather-bound notebook. The cover read, Camilla Wren's Journal, revealing the secrets of bass notes. She handed it to him, voice trembling, only what I choose to share. Alaric turned each page reverently, sketches of aroma-blending charts, notes on adding pine resin for warmth, annotations on skin pH balance. Every handwritten line carried her mother's warmth, as if whispering from the past. They settled on a stone bench beneath an olive tree. Aloan gazed across the deep purple blooms and confessed, When Mother died, I couldn't hold her hand in time. I feared her final fragrance would vanish on the wind. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Alaric said nothing, simply enfolding her in his arms. In that embrace she felt safe and understood, her heart's wounds gently bandaged. Silence lingered among the flowers until Aloan wiped her tears and forced a smile. Thank you for coming here. Alaric replied softly, I came not only for justice in this case, but for you, someone who entrusted me with so much. She lowered her gaze, eyes shining. Do you know how much I've thought of you? The words, at last spoken, shattered the final barrier between them. In that moment, Grasse became more than a land of blooms and scents. It bore witness to two wounded souls finding one another. Aloan lifted her hand to his shoulder, brushing it gently. Please stay another day. I want to show you the house where my mother lived. Alaric took her hand and smiled. I wouldn't miss a thing. As dusk fell, they walked down a lavender-lined path together, the breeze carrying notes of jasmine and cedar. Between the blossoms, an unspoken love blossomed, a promise of new beginnings, woven from memory, scent, and shared hope. A sudden afternoon downpour swept across the lavender fields of Grasse, each crystal drop shimmering as it fell onto the swaying purple blooms. Seraphina Wren and Alaric Montgomery stood amid that sea of flowers, the umbrella's canopy casting a muted glow, yet neither hurried for shelter. Tiny raindrops clung to Seraphina's lashes and mingled with the tears she hadn't wiped away. Under the dusky light of late afternoon, the dark green leaves and violet stalks stretched into a scene both wild and dreamlike. Seraphina trembled slightly in her damp trench coat, her gaze locked on Alaric's blue eyes. She felt his warm, steady breath, a stark contrast to the chill all around. As he bent to gather fallen blossoms, she remembered their first meeting in a London rainstorm. Now, rain had woven a new moment between their kindred hearts. The patter of rain on the umbrella and the faint lavender scent on the breeze awakened every sense. Alaric drew in a deep breath, his rich voice breaking the hush. Seraphina, I've followed you across Europe, from Paris and Milan to Tokyo, New York, and now Grasse, for only one reason. She held her breath, cheeks flushed, heart racing. His tone grew huskier. I don't just love justice, I love your smile, the fragrances you create, and your sensitive soul. Raindrops on Seraphina's lashes made her eyes glisten. She shook her head, striving for calm amid the storm of emotion. How did you know I? She choked on her words and turned away, hiding her tears. But Alaric stepped before her, gently tipping back the hood that sheltered her wet hair and brushing it aside. His hand's warmth spread across her cheek, dissolving the cold. I know you're strong, he whispered, but I also know you fear leaning on anyone. You fear losing your freedom and being hurt again. His eyes brimmed with conviction. But you can trust me, can't you? I will never let you be alone. The rain's rhythm echoed their quickening hearts, freezing time in that violet-hued downpour. Seraphina placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. She hesitated, then rested her palm over his. I tried to keep my distance. I didn't want to become a burden. Her voice trembled. But you've stood by me every time I called for justice, every time I hurt. She lifted her gaze, rainlight dancing in her eyes like a stormlit sky. Do you know the very first note in my newest formula is dedicated to you? Alaric smiled softly, leaning against the weathered fence as the lavender bent around them. He bent to press a kiss on her hand, then lifted her face to meet his gaze. You've given me a world of fragrance, and I want to give you my world. She closed her eyes, welcoming his first kiss in the lavender rain. The downpour wrapped them in a private embrace, sheltering their fragile new love. When the rain finally eased and the western sky blushed purple, Seraphina rested her head on Alaric's shoulder, her hand still over his heart, feeling its unwavering rhythm. They stood in shared silence, listening to the last patter of raindrops and the hum of honeybees seeking shelter. Doubt and fear melted away, leaving only genuine love and fresh trust. Alaric whispered into her ear, let's build our future together. I'll stay by your side, no matter where you choose to go. Seraphina lifted her head, a rare, radiant smile breaking on her lips. I will. She pressed her face to his chest, inhaling the faint scent of his coat mingled with lavender. He gently lifted her chin and pressed one final kiss before letting her rest against him. Moments later, as dusk deepened, they gathered their things. Under the small awning of Maison de Notes, Alaric closed the umbrella and offered his arm. Seraphina slipped her hand into his, warmth flooding her palm. He smiled, drawing from his coat pocket a small purple-ribboned box, the hue of lavender and of their shared memories. Inside lay a silver ring engraved with E&A, a token of their promise. Seraphina gasped softly, how did you know my favorite color is purple? He pressed the ring to her lips before sliding it onto her fourth finger. She bowed her head, beaming as happy tears filled her eyes. He drew her into a gentle embrace, the scent of lavender and leather composing a sweet, intimate symphony. When night fully fell, they walked hand in hand along the flower-lined path, their long shadows illuminated by the workshop lights. Eloan leaned into Alaric and asked, "Do you think we can overcome any obstacle together?" He paused, meeting her gaze with unwavering resolve. "I believe any challenge is small before our love and determination." She smiled, her heart brimming with hope. That night, in the loft bedroom overlooking the fields, Eloan sat by the window gazing at the moonlit lavender sea. The silver glint of her new ring caught the moonlight, a reminder of their vow. Alaric stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, breathing in the final lingering scent of lavender on the breeze. No words were needed. They, the calm lawyer and the fragrant artist, would write together the next chapter of their story, a love and justice entwined in an enduring serenade. The dawn light crept onto the Charles de Gaulle tarmac as Eloan Wren disembarked from business class. She wheeled her elegant leather suitcase through security, still carrying the warmth of Grasse in her heart. A faint lavender scent clung to her trench coat collar, a gentle reminder of her final memory with Alaric Montgomery. In her handbag lay her mother's antique notebook and the silver ring engraved E and A, the emblem of their promise to accompany one another. On the 6-hour non-stop flight to Hong Kong, Eloan glanced at the in-flight entertainment screen but found her eyes drifting toward the green hills on the horizon. She recalled the CEO's message from the Pan Asia Fragrance Group, "We've prepared the flagship store, please come review." When she arrived, she would oversee the display design and ensure Nocturne d'Etoile was presented exactly as planned. This was the final step in bringing her mother's legacy to Asia. The plane landed at Hong Kong International Airport in the afternoon. As the cabin door opened, she was greeted by warm, humid sea air tinged with exhaust. She waved goodbye to the flight attendant and hailed a taxi for Tsim Sha Tsui. Neon lights from the skyscrapers dazzled her, but a fresh excitement welled within her. She was ready to face her final challenge, unveiling a French-Asian fragrance experience in this bustling port city. Inside the taxi, she checked her email one last time, the design drawings for the scent bar, lighting plans, and the placement of fresh lavender pots flanking the entrance. Every detail had been pre-approved with her local partners. She paused at one line, "Please feature the final Grasse memory scents throughout." Eloan pressed her lips together, knowing she'd need to curate special samples with great care. At the small harborfront hotel she always used in Hong Kong, a steaming cup of oolong tea awaited her. She set her bag on the table, sipped the tea to wash away the plane's fuel odor, and tremblingly tapped her phone to summon Alexander. Message sent, she looked out over Victoria Harbour and the lit Star Ferry Pier. This city's blend of modernity and tradition mirrored her own fate, rooted in heritage yet yearning to reach beyond. Less than an hour later, Alexander arrived with a suitcase full of samples and equipment. He nodded, "You need me for setup?" Eloan smiled and nodded back, relief flooding her. Together they made their way to the flagship space in IFC Mall, a glass tower rising into the clouds. Inside, a vast hall of high ceilings and warm spotlights shining on glossy white floors created an air of understated luxury. The local design team had already installed oak shelving, monolithic glass display cases, and a bar-style scent station. Eloan and Alexander immediately set to work. She directed where to place the lavender pots and how to arrange each glass bottle. He measured the counter height and adjusted the spotlight angles. Her movements were professional, sure, precise, her gaze commanding the flow of fragrance across the room. Amid their hurry, Eloan's phone buzzed. A message from Alaric arrived alongside a snapshot of a Paris industry magazine cover featuring his exclusive interview, "Justice and Fragrance, a Symphony of Law and Art." She couldn't help but smile. She initiated a video call, and his face appeared against the backdrop of his London office lights. He waved, "I just had to see your flagship store, live." Eloan beamed, "You're here early." He returned her smile, "I'm wrapping up the Ophelia case. I'll be on the next flight to join you." His warm voice felt like a savior across the miles. She nodded. I'll wait for you, there's much for you to check, down to the smallest details. He promised, I'll be there. Hanging up, she turned to Alexander. Mr. Montgomery's on his way. Prepare the final memory scent samples for him. They worked straight through lunch, barely noticing hunger. Aloan carefully tied purple ribbons around VIP gift boxes, marked testing seat locations, and indicated the photo op corners. Every step was under her meticulous supervision. When the store clock chimed 4 p.m., the afternoon sunshine filtered through the high windows, illuminating baskets of lavender and rows of glass jars, lending the space an almost magical glow. Just then, the revolving door opened and Alaric stepped in. He wore a deep navy suit, carried his leather briefcase, and paused in the doorway, eyes widening at the sumptuous scene. I didn't expect you to finish so quickly, he said. Aloan approached, her eyes sparkling. I wanted this to be perfect for you. He strolled through the store, jotting notes. The spotlight is angled too far right, it risks evaporating the fragrances. Also, we should create a separate tasting area to prevent scent overlap. She agreed, moving to partition a velvet-curtained nook by the bay windows. He nodded in satisfaction. As the VIP test run was about to begin, the two stood side by side at the scent bar, pouring memory note samples into slender vials. Aloan whispered, "Thank you for never leaving my side." He clasped her hand, sincerity shining in his eyes. "Wherever you are, I want to be there." The lavender and sandalwood aroma formed a steadfast bass note, just like the bond they had woven through fragrance and justice. When the first guests entered, they exchanged a warm smile. Their journey, from the Ophelia trial to every step across the globe, had reached one milestone and opened another. Together, they would create a sanctuary of scent where love and legacy intertwined. In Asia's most dynamic port city, Aloan no longer walked her creative path alone. By her side was Alaric, the steadfast lawyer, holding her hand on every road ahead. Dawn's first golden rays were just touching Hong Kong's skyline as Alaric Montgomery awoke in his hotel room overlooking Victoria Harbour. He drew in a deep breath of the lingering oolong tea aroma from last night's cup, awakening all his senses. Though he had made it in time for Aloan's flagship store opening, his legal work in London still awaited him. The appeal hearing for the Ophelia Caldwell case was set for 2 days hence. But this morning, his thoughts were not on courtroom verdicts, they were on the woman who awaited him beyond the window. En route to Czech Lapcoke Airport, Alaric sat tense in the back of the car, staring at Aloan's last text. "Thank you for yesterday. I have to fly to Dubai now for the Middle East contract signing, can you make it?" Her brief message pierced him like an arrow. He called his London assistant, entrusted the entire appeal to a colleague, and booked the next Cathay Pacific flight to Dubai. His heart raced. For the first time in ages, emotion, not duty, filled his thoughts. The plane touched down at Dubai International as the sun blazed over golden dunes. Alaric stepped into the vast glass atrium, hit by a blast of hot, dry air scented with tarmac and air conditioning. His mind replayed Aloan's words. "I'll wait for you at the Burj Al Arab." He smiled, flagged a taxi to the private Rolls-Royce waiting area, and climbed in. Sure enough, the Phantom awaited him. The Burj Al Arab rose like a sail against the deep blue gulf. Alaric collected his gilded keycard at the lobby and rode the private elevator to Suite 704. When the door opened, Aloan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out over the sunlit waters. She wore a minimalist evening gown of flowing chiffon, one shoulder bare, her amber eyes lighting up at his arrival. "You made it," she said quietly, a hint of relief tugging at her lips. He set his suitcase down and surveyed the room, a small desk strewn with contract documents, a mini projector, and Nocturne d'Etoile samples arrayed on glass shelves. "I've prepared everything," she continued evenly. "Our partners await us in the conference wing." Aloan draped her shawl over a chair and turned back to him. Beneath her composed veneer glimmered the tension of this critical signing, the gateway for her fragrance brand into the Middle East. Together they descended to the conference level. A glass sky bridge spanned a lagoon, leading to a towering panorama of sea. Inside, long tables draped in white-faced rows of emerald-upholstered chairs. When Sheikh Al Faisal's delegation arrived, Aloan rose with a poised smile, pen in hand, and Alaric stood proudly behind her. The ceremony flowed smoothly. The Sheikh's representative beamed as he signed the golden-nibbed contract, shutters clicking in celebration. Aloan returned to the audience and squeezed Alaric's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, weariness woven through her joy. That evening, they journeyed into the desert for the desert dinner, an outdoor feast under the stars. A convoy of land cruisers carried them across rippling dunes lit by headlights. In a secluded valley, a long table was set with gilded dinnerware and flickering candles. Aloan donned a white faux fur shawl. Alaric wore a sleek black tuxedo and bow tie. Amid the desert breeze, they spoke of the future. Aloan described plans to establish an on-site atelier and train local artisans. Alaric shared his dream of founding a charity empowering single women toward financial independence. Beneath the rustling sands, their shared yearnings for freedom and purpose grew ever clearer. At midnight, when the other guests departed, Aloan and Alaric lingered by a small campfire. She rested her head on his shoulder, voice hushed. "Thank you for following me here." He stroked her dark hair. "I'll follow you anywhere." A tear of happiness traced her cheek, mingling with the sparkling desert sand. The next morning, Aloan received an email from her Singapore partner. "We invite you next week to join the Olfactive Art Expo." She glanced at Alaric, hesitation in her gaze. "I must go again." He smiled gently. "Then I will come with you." She nodded, slipping her hand into his. "Thank you. But remember, I need to learn to cherish my own space, too." Alaric looked at her, understanding that their road ahead would not only be a relentless series of flights, but also a lesson in balancing love with individuality. He vowed, "I'll always be by your side, and respect the distance you need." She smiled, the soft scent of perfume whispering, "Love is not a tether, but wings for two hearts to soar." And so their journeys continued, from Dubai to Singapore, then Cape Town, Rio de Janeiro, no longer a lone solo venture, but a shared adventure hand in hand. Alaric in his dark suit, she in her flowing silks, they wrote the next chapters across every airport, every hotel, and through every violet-tinted lavender field. The chase went on without end, yet always led them back to each other, where love and justice wove an eternal refrain. The pale dawn of Singapore slipped through the curtains of Aloan Wren's suite at Marina Bay Sands, gently caressing her face as she woke. Though she had tried to maintain her distance while completing the olfactive exhibition, her heart still beat in uneasy rhythms, yearning for freedom yet afraid of the warmth of affection's embrace. Nearby, Alaric Montgomery had thoughtfully prepared 2 cups of strong black coffee. She sat up, gazing out at the infinity pool, conflicted as an incoming call from the museum CEO invited her to fly on to Cape Town. At the minibar, Aloan sipped her coffee, its bitter edge blending with the faint musk of patchouli at her collar, soothing her mind. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a message from Alaric. He'd booked a ticket to accompany her, even though she hadn't asked him to. Her heart fluttered with uncertainty. He was more than a companion now, he was becoming her anchor. She hesitated over "share my location," then deleted it and typed instead, "Thank you for always being by my side. I'll fly to Cape Town alone, please don't worry about the London hearing." No sooner had she sent it than Alaric called back. His voice was warm and tinged with hurt. "I understand you need space. But you know I've arranged everything for the Cape Town exhibit, from collectors' partnerships to shipping budgets." Aloan frowned, tears slipping down her cheeks as she imagined what he'd given up to impress her. She set down her phone, her heart in turmoil. Was she inadvertently hurting the man who sacrificed so much just to see her happy? The Airbus A380 departed Singapore, crossing the Indian Ocean as the sun dipped below the horizon. In business class, Aloan leaned back, listening to the engine's gentle hum. She remembered his words in Grasse, "Love is not binding, it's wings for us to soar." Now she realized she longed to fly alongside him yet feared admitting it, afraid of losing freedom, afraid of dependence. Yet he had drawn her a pair of soaring wings, so they could rise toward dawn together. The flight landed in Cape Town under a starlit sky. A crisp, salty breeze mingled with the Atlantic spray as Aloan wheeled her bag through arrivals. She shrugged into her wool coat and stepped out to find Alaric waiting, wearing a fedora and dark trench coat, his face tired yet bright with belief. She paused, then approached and draped her arm around his shoulders. "Thank you for coming." At the Table Bay Hotel, they sat at a round table illuminated by candlelight, burgundy wine glowing in their glasses. Aloan looked him in the eye, her voice serious with worry. "I don't want you to sacrifice so much for me. I fear I'll hold you back." Alaric took a slow sip of wine and replied, "I don't see it as sacrifice. Being with you brings me joy. I'll take any long flight, any professional pressure, just to see your smile." Aloan closed her eyes, picturing their kiss beneath the lavender rain in Grasse, the warm embrace after the Paris trial, the way he looked when she stepped into the Milan taxi. Each memory was a shining fragment building a fortress in her heart. She inhaled the famed Napa Valley wine aroma they'd flown in for Cape Town and said softly, "Then I want you not merely as a companion, but as my life partner. Will you join me in building our future, not only across fields of flowers, but in every plan of life?" Alaric squeezed her hand, emotion shining in his eyes. "I've waited a long time for this moment. I love you, Aloan. I'm ready to face every challenge with you." They fell silent, the distant sound of waves lapping the shore their soundtrack to unwavering love. Gazing out at the lit harbor from their window, Aloan leaned against him with a tender smile. "We'll unveil in Cape Town, then expand worldwide, just as my mother dreamed." Alaric nodded, eyes sparkling, "And I will always be by your side." Before them lay the glittering city of Cape Town. Lawyer and perfumer understood that the heart's true trial lay not in the miles they traveled or the weight of endless airline tickets, but in overcoming the fear of losing independence while embracing love's wings. Now that their hearts beat as one, they were ready to press forward, nurturing their love and crafting olfactory symphonies to outlast every test life could bring. The first pale rays of an autumn dawn filtered through the curtains of Alaric Montgomery's Mayfair penthouse, gently touching Aloan Wren's face as she woke. The expansive room, its floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Kensington Gardens, already showed oaks and maples tinged with gold. A soft trace of lavender and sandalwood lingered on the shelves, remnants of the note of memory Aloan had sent before they returned together from Cape Town. Alaric reviewed their busy schedule in his mind, the dual grand opening of her boutique and their new legal office for creative entrepreneurs, set for 122 Fulham Road, where Aloan would cut the ribbon and he would sign the founding charter of their Justice and Fragrance Foundation. Before leaving the bed, Alaric checked his phone and reread Aloan's final message. "Please wear the navy suit, so you'll look perfectly balanced between our worlds of scent and justice." He smiled, recalling every step of their journey, from hand-distilling oils in Grasse to signing contracts in Dubai, from fighting Ophelia in Paris to finding equilibrium in Singapore. Now they stood at the threshold of uniting fragrance and fairness under one roof, a space where guests could experience scent while women entrepreneurs received free legal counsel. Around midday, they stepped into the Rolls-Royce Phantom waiting below. Aloan wore a lavender sheath dress and delicate heels, her hair swept into a low chignon revealing her graceful nape, like a living portrait of a fragrance goddess. Alaric wore a dark navy suit and a pale striped tie, carrying the morning's Justice and Fragrance Foundation documents. They exchanged a gentle look that spoke of shared trust and hope. The grand opening unfolded in a split space, one half lined with floral petal-shaped fragrance displays, the other half featuring a reception desk bearing the sign "Legal Advice, Free for Women Entrepreneurs." As guests signed in, Aloan took the silver scissors and cut the first purple ribbon. Hundreds of silk lavender blooms fell in a soft shower, marking the beginning of a new journey, one where love and justice harmonized like a sweet chord. Under warm golden lights, Aloan invited Alaric to the stage. The applause hushed as he stepped forward, voice resonant. Let fragrance be more than a private memory. Let it become a bridge that empowers communities, where women can conduct business with confidence and financial independence. We believe justice and art are inseparable, each enriching the other to create lasting value. He bowed slightly, his eyes on Aloan as she watched, tears of pride and joy glistening in her gaze. Late that afternoon, after the crowds dispersed, the two stood by the Serpentine's banks, watching the sunset over the water. All was quiet but for rustling leaves and the scent of jasmine on the breeze. Aloan took his hand. Thank you for believing in this dream with me, for distilling every drop of memory into these fragrances. He stroked the lapel of her dress. I found myself in the notes you compose, and I found our future in your smile. In that still moment, they shared a soft kiss, closing one chapter of their travels and opening another full of meaning. A sparrow's song drifted from the trees, reminding them that, though the world may shift, the vows they made today would stand firm for all the tomorrows. Aloan rested her head on his chest, her fingers lacing through his navy shirt, feeling his heartbeat march in time with hers, the heartbeat of justice, of love, and of unending hope. And when London's night fell, the lavender in its oak-framed vessel on the reception desk breathed a gentle benediction, Camilla's whispered blessing over her daughter, over justice, and over the perfect symphony of love they had found. The brilliant sunset painted the long hulls of gondolas purple along the Grand Canal as Aloan Wren and Alaric Montgomery stepped into Piazza San Marco to the echoing bells of the Basilica. The global debut of the Immortal Heart collection, honoring Camilla's heritage and love, was to take place at the Palazzo Pisani Moretta. Beneath dazzling chandeliers and deep red velvet drapes, Aloan felt a thrill of nerves and joy. This was not only her chance to prove her artistry but also a celebration of the journey they had shared. As they entered the grand hall, rows of golden candles flickered on marble reliefs, and the air was infused with French vanilla oud and Arabian jasmine. Aloan draped a lavender lace cloak over her slender frame, revealing the gossamer chiffon gown beneath. Memories flooded her mind, their first meeting in the Montgomery and Baird waiting room, the secret note "Tell me to fight" Alaric sent before the Paris trial, his warm smile under the lavender rain. She drew in a steadying breath of the bass notes, bracing herself before the assembled guests. Outside the doors, a string ensemble tuned for a modern take on Vivaldi's La Serenissima, a fitting tribute to legendary Venice. Alaric stood by her side, his hand resting lightly on her arm, his gentle gaze seeking her reassurance. Are you ready? He asked firmly, warmth in his voice. Aloan smiled, eyes shining. With you here, always. In that moment, their reflections shimmered on the gilded wall behind them. When the opening drum roll sounded, Alaric stepped forward to greet the delegation while Aloan took the lectern. Gripping the microphone, she spoke clearly. I am Aloan Wren. The Immortal Heart collection was born from warm memories with my mother, notes of lavender, damask rose, and sandalwood. Each bottle is a story of undying love, and of the justice that guided me through darkness. Applause thundered, but she felt tears prickle her eyes. As Aloan signed sample bottles and spoke with distinguished guests, Alaric watched her with pride. He approached the display table and gently placed their and a silver ring atop a violet silk cloth, a constant reminder of the vow woven into each precious drop. When she turned and their eyes met, they shared a silent smile, as if composing a wordless duet. After the ceremony, they strolled down the limestone corridor, candlelight dancing on the walls. Aloan paused and faced him. Thank you for bringing me here, she said softly. Alaric smiled and brushed a strand of lace from her cheek. I only did what I had to. Then, bowing to capture the magic of the moment, he kissed her deeply amid perfumed air and lantern glow, a seal on their shared itinerary. On the balcony overlooking the canal, they sat on a velvet sofa, sipping chilled prosecco. The gentle lap of water against stone and the light drizzle coaxing tiny blossoms from the barges created a hushed soundtrack. She leaned into him and whispered, Do you think we have fulfilled our mission of justice and fragrance? Alaric squeezed her hand and replied, This is only the beginning. We have so many dreams, to fund women entrepreneurs, to create new lines of scent art. Eloan nodded, hope lighting her eyes. And I will pursue those dreams with you. As deep night fell, the bells of San Giorgio Maggiore tolled across the lagoon, a reminder time flows ever onward. Eloan pressed a kiss to his neck. You have given me everything, love, support, and faith in myself. Alaric returned her kiss as orange blossoms and musk drifted around them. And you are my whole world, he murmured. Two hearts beat as one, the final chord in their symphony of trials, opening the next movement, a melody of enduring love and untiring dreams.